Hello, hello. Welcome back to the Break Vape podcast. I am your host, Tami Ernst. If you have been listening since day one, you know that I am a life coach and a former vapor. I coach on vaping, stress, mindset, and goals. This is episode number 5, and it is a very special episode because my granny is here with me, and I will be bringing her on in a bit to tell her story about why and how she actually quit smoking. How many years ago?
About 30.
30 years ago. Okay. And believe me, you'll want to hear the story firsthand from my granny because she tells it so much better than I ever could. She has another story that I would like her to share too, by the way, which is the one about how my pawpaw quit smoking. But first, I want to say thank you to all of you for listening because it just lights me up to be able to help so many of you from all over the world, apparently. I have my podcast analytics dash open, and I am able to see where in the world you guys are tuning in from. I can't see names. I cannot see contact information or anything personal like that. Just geography. So a big shout out to my listeners in New Zealand, the United Kingdom, Iran, Australia, and of course the United States, where I live in Houston, Texas. In the U.S., I see listeners from Texas, California, New Hampshire, Virginia, Illinois, Florida, Missouri, Arizona, and Montana. Thank you all so much for tuning in. I am here to be a resource for you guys, and I'm not going anywhere. We usually talk about vaping, but today we are going to focus on big tobacco and their role in cigarettes as well, so that you can see how consistent and manipulative their schemes have always been. So without further ado, I would like you to meet my granny. Hi, Granny.
Hi.
Can you please introduce yourself and tell us your name and where you're from?
My name is Nita Perkle, and I'm from South Texas. I live in a rural area south of San Antonio.
Great. And Granny, can you tell our listeners how old were you when you started smoking?
I was in my early 20s.
And how old are you now?
Well, the years tell me that I'm 87, but I don't feel 87, so therefore I don't claim 87.
Well, that's the way to do it. And do you remember how old you were when you decided to quit smoking?
I was in my early 60s. I'm pretty sure that's correct.
So you would have smoked all in all for about how many years or decades do you think?
Well, from my 20s to my 60s, that's about 40 years.
And do you remember why you first started?
Oh, it was just a popular thing to do. Everybody smoked, and if you watch the movie stars in the movies, it looked glamorous.
Like glamorous. And how long was Pawpaw? So listeners, need to tell you. So Pawpaw is my granny's late husband, my grandfather, and I refer to him as Pawpaw. And how long do you think Pawpaw was a smoker?
I don't know when he started, although we went to the same high school. But I'm pretty sure that he smoked at least 40 years, maybe 50.
You guys are probably on the same page with that.
Right.
Yeah, I remember Pawpaw smoking for a really long time, and when I was growing up, secondhand smoke didn't really seem to be a big deal. I think all the adults were smoking, and I actually remember enjoying the smell of a cigarette when it was very first lit, not after that. But I remember Pawpaw smoking when I was little. So Pawpaw actually wound up quitting smoking later on in life, and I'd love for you to tell the story of how you remember that.
Well, unfortunately, he had a heart attack.
I remember that.
And he was confined to the hospital for a couple of months. It was very serious. It was actually a cardiac arrest, and they had to bring him back. And after about 2 months, one of the orderlies in the hospital informed me that my husband had been caught down in the emergency room with his hospital gown flapping, trying to bum cigarettes. So when I went to the hospital, I asked him why he was down there trying to bum cigarettes, And he said, because I wanted a cigarette. And I said, but you don't smoke anymore. He said, I don't. I said, no, you haven't smoked for 2 months. And he said, oh, okay. And that was the end of that. He just never asked to smoke again.
And that was that. Well, I wouldn't wish that upon anybody, the heart attack and everything, but that is a kind of a neat way to quit, I guess, just to wake up and have somebody tell you that you don't smoke anymore. I remember that. I think I was in early college when Papa had that massive heart attack. I remember studying in the hallways.
Yes.
And everything. Well, let's talk about your story now. So, Granny, why did you decide to quit smoking cigarettes?
I decided to quit when I read somewhere that the tobacco companies were actually adding nicotine to the tobacco. Number one, to get you hooked. Number two, to keep you hooked. And I didn't like that. I thought, well, that's a very controlling thing, and I think I should be in control of my body, not some tobacco company. So I thought, okay, I'll try to figure out how to quit. So I also read that if you could go without smoking for 48 hours, the nicotine would be out of your body. So the craving should not be there. It would simply be a mindset after that you would have to deal with.
Mm-hmm. So do you think the nicotine was always there in those cigarettes, or was that something that they started to add over time?
Oh, no, there is nicotine in tobacco. I remember my grandfather smoked 2 cigarettes a day, but that was before they added nicotine. And so I think the amount of nicotine was small enough originally in the tobacco that you wouldn't become addicted, because he never craved cigarettes during the day. He just enjoyed one with his coffee in the morning and one with his tea in the evening.
Mm-hmm. And then they added all the extra nicotine later on.
At some point they started adding nicotine, and that was to keep you hooked on it.
And you didn't like somebody controlling you and manipulating you like that.
Absolutely not. My body is mine.
So let's tell everybody who's listening to the show, I absolutely love this story of how my granny quit smoking cigarettes for good. So Granny, go ahead and share with everybody, please, what you did to quit.
Well, I tried to think of how I would go without smoking for 48 hours, and I knew that just sitting at home was not going to do it, because I would be craving a cigarette and they would be there. So I thought, okay, I like to shop, so I'll go shopping. So I told my husband that I was going to go to Walmart. I was going when the store opened in the morning, and I was going to stay until they closed. I was not going to allow myself to leave Walmart, to leave the building, and therefore I couldn't smoke. But I would just shop all day. So he agreed to go with me, and he would sit in the food court. And so we went shopping, and I would fill my basket with everything I thought I might have ever wanted. I just walked around the store, adding things to my basket, trying on clothes, putting them in the basket. And then I'd go to the food court and show Papa what I had selected. And he'd discuss it with me while eating everything in the food court. And then I'd go back. I made a rule for myself that I had to put everything back exactly where I found it. I could not abandon the basket. If I took it off the shelf, I had to remember where it came from and go put it back.
Wait, so you didn't actually buy anything?
Oh, no. I didn't go buy anything. I just went to shop.
This is what makes this story so fun.
So I found out that in a day's time, 9 to 9 then, that I could actually fill my basket and return everything to the shelf 3 times during that period of time, and that's what I did. But the one thing I didn't consider was that it was kind of a strange looking thing to do. And so I noticed after putting everything back from my second basket and starting to select things for my third, that I was being followed in the store, and I was being watched. And I thought, security is thinks this is a strange thing to do, and now they're trying to figure out what I'm doing. But I kept shopping because I knew I wasn't stealing anything, and I wasn't doing anything wrong. So I kept shopping, and I did that until it was time for the store to close, putting everything back, and constantly being followed by security.
Oh, goodness.
Which made me a little uncomfortable, and I thought, now what will I do? I can't come back here tomorrow because I'm sure he has my face etched in his brain right now, and he will know that I've come back to do the same thing, and they don't know what I'm doing. So I thought, okay, I'm going to have to select a second store. So I thought, okay, Target. I'll go to Target. So that's exactly what I did. But when I asked my husband if he would accompany me to Target, he said not no, but absolutely no. He said, I cannot sit in the food court again for 9 hours waiting for you to finish shopping. So he stayed home, and I went alone. Well, I did the same thing at Target all day long. Could not smoke a cigarette because I wouldn't go outside. I did stop and eat lunch in the food court, but I would not allow myself to leave the store. And I did the same thing, and by the end of the day, sure enough, I was being followed by security in Target. They thought I was doing something strange.
They're on to you.
But my 48 hours were almost up, and I was convinced by what I had read that the nicotine would not be in my body anymore, and I would be able to control it. So after the second day, the third day, I got up, had my coffee as usual, but I didn't have it in the same way. I thought, I have to change my routine. My routine had been to have a cup of coffee and a cigarette as soon as I got up. So I fixed my cup of coffee, but I went for a walk in my garden. And I walked around and looked at all my flowers and my plants, drank my coffee, and then when I came in, I would find something new to do. And I thought, I have to keep doing something new all day just to keep from thinking about it. Although I have no nicotine in my body, my mind still remembers that I smoke.
Mm-hmm.
And that's exactly what I did. And it worked for me. It probably would work for you too.
The shopping method. I absolutely love it.
I did too. And it did work for me.
Did you ever buy a single thing
Not one
from
thing.
either store?
Not one thing.
That's so funny. And then on the third day, you just changed your routines.
Yes, and I tried to change it every day for several days. And sure enough, by the end of the week, I noticed that I really wasn't thinking about cigarettes anymore. I was trying to think about new things to do.
Mm-hmm.
And that worked for me. And I haven't smoked since.
That's amazing. So how long do you think it was from the time you quit until your brain just didn't want it?
I don't think I ever thought about cigarettes after the first week. I just didn't think of them anymore because I had trained myself to think of new things, new things to do.
Oh, yeah.
I picked up some hobbies and some craft type hobbies and stuck with that actually, I enjoyed it so much I stuck with that for several years.
I tell my listeners all the time that to really quit vaping, you are going to have to feel your feelings and change the way that you think. And it sounds like that's exactly what you did.
That's what I did.
Just out of instinct.
Yes. And now I've read that actually vaping is as bad as actually smoking. And so is secondhand vape smoke.
It is very dangerous. So vapes have actually... according to a study done at Johns Hopkins University, they have over 2,000 chemicals in them. They also have chemical compounds and dangerous metals and all kinds of terrible things. There's not a lot of studies out yet about the effects of secondhand vaping. I'm sure those are going to come in the future, though. Definitely don't want anybody inhaling that secondhand smoke.
I actually recently saw some pictures, and this was on the Dr. Phil show, of some teenagers who were in the hospital on life support caused by vaping.
Yes, so there is a disease, which actually I was going to bring up in a minute. and you beat me to it. Um, so we'll come back to this. There is a disease called EVALI, and actually more than 68 people have died from EVALI in the US, and that is directly caused by vaping. It's a brand new disease directly caused by vaping. And is there anything else you want to add to your quit story? Because I just think it is such a great story.
No, I think that's pretty much all I've done to make sure that it doesn't affect me anymore. And the only thing I can advise other people to do is don't start, and you won't have to stop.
So true, so true. So let's switch back to talking about vaping for a little while. So Granny, I know that you are aware that vaping is bad because, like you just mentioned, you saw some things on the Dr. Phil show, but also because around this time, a year or two ago, you were telling me about how you had heard that vaping was bad for mental health and had a strong correlation with depression. And of course, you were right, because later on, I found out through my own research about the dopamine hijack that takes place in our brains when we vape, which I will cover that in an upcoming episode. So now we have teenagers battling depression, going to rehab, and getting ill from EVALI, like we were just talking about. EVALI stands for e-cigarette or vaping associated lung injury, which is covered in episode 2 of this podcast. If anyone wants to know all about EVALI, go back and listen to that episode. So Big Tobacco introduced vapes under the veil of giving cigarette smokers a safer alternative, but these smokers were never their actual customer base. Our kids were. They were the target. Now that we've talked about how manipulative Big Tobacco has been all along, like in my granny's case, we can shed some light on the same shady tactics that Big Tobacco is currently using today with vaping. I'm going to read you guys a slide from a course that I teach about how to quit vaping for good. So here we go. The battle against vapes is like deja vu for public health community who successfully fought to eliminate youth-attracting marketing tricks decades ago, like colorful packaging, candy flavors in cigarettes, and mascots such as Joe the Camel. Do you remember Joe the Camel, Granny?
Oh, yes.
Yes. Do you remember what a big upset it was?
Oh, yes.
All the parents and adults were just outraged that this cartoon character who looked so sleek and cool in his convertible car and his sunglasses,
of course,
was smoking. So they did it on purpose to try to get kids hooked. Offering vapes as a quote-unquote safe alternative for cigarette smokers has just simply been that veil for a rebranding campaign to target today's youth. So I was actually explaining this scenario to Granny on the drive over here in the car. I did some research and I found out that the big vape company called Juul, who almost everybody is familiar with because Juul was kind of the first one that really hit the market. Juul Labs was found guilty by congressional investigators for paying schools up to $10,000 to let company representatives deliver messages directly to children that vaping was safe. In at least one presentation, without teachers or parents present, a Juul rep showed kids how to use a Juul e-cig and told the kids that it was safe and that FDA approval was right around the corner. It's so shady. If you would like to hear more about that particular story, check out the podcast called Big Tobacco Messed with the Wrong Moms, and you will hear all about it. So the moms who started that podcast, their kids actually went to one of these schools where a Juul rep came in and told the kids that it was totally safe. And today, Big Tobacco is clearly going after kids on social media where it is hard for parents to track. Granny, is there anything you'd like to add to that info, thoughts, or comments?
No, I think you've covered it very well.
Well, it is really just kind of infuriating that Big Tobacco is doing the same tactics, just same thing, different generation.
Well, they're just using a different tactic to get kids addicted.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and you mentioned the amount of nicotine earlier in a vape. So 1 Juul has the equivalent of more than 1 pack of cigarettes in it. And these kids and adults who start vaping, typically some of them go through more than 1 joule a day. So that's the equivalent of smoking a couple packs of cigarettes a day. It's just highly, highly addictive. So guys, I have my granny on today and am offering you all of this information for you to get very curious about not just how to quit vaping for yourself, but how we can protect our kids, our teens, and our youth going forward, because big tobacco is after them and it is up to us to stop them. Okay, if anyone has questions for my granny, please send them in an email to hello@breakvapes.com. That's hello with an S at breakvapes.com. And use that same email address if you would like more information on how I can help you or someone you know quit vaping. I offer coaching on vaping, stress, mindset, and goals. Right now, I offer a coaching package where I coach clients for 1 hour per week for 6 weeks. If you would like to sign up and quit vaping for good, send an email to hello@breakvapes.com. Thank you, Granny, so much for coming on my podcast, and thank you for so many other things, for being the strong matriarch of our family, for helping to raise me, teaching me how to cook, and for being yourself, because I always know that I can tell you absolutely anything, and I love you so much.
I love you too, and you're very welcome.
Okay, everyone, have a great rest of your week, and I will see you on the next episode. See you later.